Have you ever just looked outside at a forest or a field and really wondered, how did all of this get here? I mean, how did our planet go from being a world of just bare rock and water to the vibrant green home we know today? Well, today, we're going to dive into one of the greatest stories ever told, the epic 500 million-year saga of how plants conquered the world.
Right. This is the big question, because before plants made that incredible leap onto land, Earth was, well, it was a desolate place. There was no real soil, no animals walking around on the continents, the land was just silent. The story of how all that changed, that is the story of the plant kingdom.
So, let's go on a bit of an evolutionary journey. We're going to step through time and look at the key moments, the big inventions, and the absolute pioneers that made all of this, life on land, possible. From the simplest little things floating in the water to the huge, complex, flowering giants that pretty much run our world today.
And our story, like all life stories here on Earth, has to start in the water. For billions of years, the oceans, the lakes, the rivers, that's where all the action was. And it's right here that we meet the great, you get the idea, ancestors of every single plant on the planet. So, say hello to the algae. Now let's break that down. They have chlorophyll, which means they can make energy from sunlight. They're autotrophic, which is just a fancy way of saying they make their own food. And, for the most part, they live in water. You have to remember these simple organisms are the foundation, the starting block for everything that's about to follow.
And when we say algae, that term covers a truly staggering amount of variety. I mean, on one end of the spectrum, you've got something like Volvox, which is this tiny, microscopic little colony of cells. And then on the other end, you have Laminaria, or kelp, which creates these absolutely massive underwater forests. The sheer range is just incredible.
And don't ever underestimate their impact just because they seem simple. This number, 50%, is gigantic. Algae are responsible for at least half of all the photosynthesis on the entire planet. Think about that. They are literally the lungs for half the world, constantly pumping oxygen into our water and atmosphere.
And algae aren't just some ancient history lesson, right? They are the absolute base of all aquatic food webs. We eat them in things like sushi. We use their extracts like carrageenan to thicken stuff like ice cream and jellies. And then there's chlorella, which is so protein-rich and efficient that it's even used as a food source for astronauts up in space. They are just unbelievably important. So for millions of years, life in the water was great, but the land, wow, that was a massive, completely untapped opportunity just waiting. So the next great chapter in our story is all about the brave pioneers who made that first incredibly risky move from the comfort of the water onto the harsh, dry land.
This quote really just nails it. It's the perfect way to think about these pioneers. I mean, think of them like the frogs of the plant world. They could totally survive on land, but they could never ever stray too far from water, because they absolutely needed it to reproduce. This group, by the way, includes the mosses and liverworts we still see all over the place today.
And this is what they looked like. They stayed low to the ground, kind of sprawling across damp soil and rocks. They had to stay close to their water source. They were the very first to put a little green on the earth, but their conquest was limited. It was all about the shorelines and the damp, shady spots. Now, these bryophytes were a huge step up from algae, for sure. They had more complex structures, but they weren't quite there yet. They didn't have true roots or stems or leaves, just sort of primitive-like versions of them. Still, their role in the ecosystem was massive. They were the first organisms to start growing on bare rock, kicking off the thousands of years-long process of creating soil.
Okay, so staying low to the ground worked for a while, but the real prize was sunlight. So the next phase of the plant conquest basically became a race upwards. It was a competition to grow taller than your neighbor and soak up all that precious energy. And to do that, that required some truly revolutionary new inventions.
And so enter the Pteridophytes, which includes ferns. And wow, what a difference. Suddenly we're seeing height, we're seeing complex leaves, a much stronger structure. This was a quantum leap forward in plant evolution, and it was all made possible by two huge breakthroughs.
So, first up, vascular tissue. This is probably the single most important invention for getting big. The best way to think about it is like nature's plumbing, a whole system of internal tubes, called xylem and phloem, that can move water from the ground all the way up to the highest leaves, and then move the sugars made in the leaves back down to the rest of the plant. No plumbing, no height. It's really that simple.
The second huge innovation was the seed, and this was an absolute game changer. The seed is basically a little survival pod for the next generation. It's a protective case with a tiny embryo inside and a packed lunch to get it started. This incredible invention allowed plants to finally break their dependence on water for reproduction and let them send their kids out to conquer new, much drier territories.
Now, the group that totally mastered this new tech was the Gymnosperms. This includes conifers like this pine tree. Their name actually means naked seed because their seeds develop out in the open on cones. They're not enclosed inside a fruit. With plumbing and seeds, these plants could now build true empires, forming the vast forest that dominated the entire age of dinosaurs.
But the story doesn't end there. Oh no. As successful as the Gymnosperms were, a new challenger was about to step onto the scene. A group of plants with a few extra tricks up their sleeve, who would go on to dominate almost every single ecosystem on land.
And right here, this is the crucial difference. Angiosperms, you know them as flowering plants, they took the seed and they gave it a serious upgrade. Instead of being naked and exposed, their seeds are tucked away safely, protected inside a fruit. And this one change, well, it would lead to an absolute explosion of diversity.
You see, angiosperms developed two secret weapons. First, there was the flower. It's not just there to look pretty, it's a brilliant advertising platform. It's designed to attract animals, insects, birds, bats, to do the work of pollination way more efficiently than just relying on the wind. And second, there's the fruit. This protective layer around the seed is also a kind of bribe, tempting animals to eat it and then carry the seeds far and wide.
And the results? Well, they speak for themselves. Angiosperms are now, without a doubt, the dominant plants on Earth. They're an exceptionally large group, found absolutely everywhere, from the tiniest little aquatic plant, Wolffia, to massive eucalyptus trees stretching over 100 meters tall. They provide almost all of our food, our fuel, and countless medicines. Our world is an angiosperm world.
So let's just bring it all together. This has been an incredible journey, right? From simple green slime floating in the water to the complex interconnected ecosystems that are all built on the incredible success of these flowering plants.
So, we saw life begin in the water with the algae. Then, the amphibious Bryophytes made those first brave steps onto land. Then, the invention of vascular tissue and seeds allowed the Pteridophytes and Gymnosperms to build the first great land empires. And finally, the ultimate takeover by the angiosperms, who used flowers and fruits to achieve total world domination.
It's just an amazing story of innovation and adaptation unfolding over hundreds of millions of years. Plants literally terraformed a planet, creating the world that we all depend on. They wrote the first, and you could argue the most important story of life on land. Which really just leaves us with one final thought. What or who is going to write the next chapter?